You are listening to a podcast by the Little School of Happiness. My name is Sandra and I'm your host. Here you will find episodes on all the Vedic teachings like yoga, Ayurveda and Vedic astrology. For more information about me and my offerings, please go to sandrahayes.eu, or if you're in Germany, sandrahayes.de. Hi again, Aoife. It's nice to have you here again.
I am so excited to be back, and it's amazing that we even got to press record because we've been chatting for so long.
I know.
Well, I thought maybe we'll put some of these insights into our podcast for other people.
Exactly. I do enjoy these little pre-record chats that we have. That's really good. Where we can discuss a few more private things, how the planets are affecting us. But, there's plenty of things left to discuss openly as well, because, we're having a really interesting time. We've discussed that already in the last podcast, all the different transits that are still happening. But what we want to talk about today is the upcoming new moon. That's going to be a really interesting one as well.
Yeah, we talked a lot in the last one about, I suppose, the major transits, and what we'd refer to as major transits are the planets, the slower moving planets. And of course, when they move into a new constellation, a new house, they bring a lot of that power with them. Even on a physical level, they're more dense, they're more gross, and they bring a big shift in energy. Yeah. And the direction of our last conversation was, my God, how many planets have moved into a place of fire?
Mm. Yeah.
And we're certainly feeling that, right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm feeling it in so many ways, on so many levels, but, it's a very intense way. And of course, it's not the same for everyone. It's, everybody's has different aspects, different planets in the birth chart. And also everyone is on a different place on their journey. And, some people are right in the midst of transformation. Some people are maybe at the beginning of a cycle or maybe at the end of a cycle. But all this fire is definitely, heating up the atmosphere around wherever it is that you are. And I can see it all around me. And in fact, I've had, over the last couple of weeks, I've literally had a surge of people signing up for astrology readings. And I've noticed a pattern in them as well. Not that they're all the same, and not that they're all the same in their question, but they've all been under a certain real pressure to free themselves from something. To have, whatever it is, we all have our belief systems that we inherited, whether from childhood through our environment, or whether it is through karma or our DNA or our ancestral belief systems, but we all carry them with us. And there really is such a time at the moment to break through, to break out of those and free ourselves from them in order to become who we want to be, who we are actually meant to be, what our potential is. And that's really interesting at the moment.
I think that's definitely the theme that's playing out. And of course, that's terrifying, right? And I think what I really admire about you is you are, and when I listen back to the podcasts, I can be a bit more doom and gloom about upcoming transits. And that's, the Saturnian side of myself. But
well, that's so important
positive.
too.
Yeah. But you're so positive and inspirational about change. I mean, you're not afraid of things breaking down, where I suppose if I look at my chart, I would be more inclined to hold on to things, maybe to cling kind of a bit more anxiously to things, when ultimately we both know that we need to let them go. These are just our different personalities.
The letting go is never easy. It's it's human, I think, to be attached to our comfort zone. Wherever we are at, whether it's a really good place that we are at, or even if it's not a good place, but it's our comfort zone. It's that which we know, and I think it's very human that we are trying to hold on to that. And in fact, I've been working a lot with the hero's journey lately, and actually since a long time already. It's a real, for me, it's a very effective way to look at the soul's journey. And what's interesting,
isn't it amazing how that hero's journey, that Joseph Campbell hero's journey, maps directly onto astrology?
Yeah, absolutely. It's the 12 steps of the hero's journey. You could map that into the 12 constellations, absolutely. And it is the soul's journey. It's, there's no coincidence that we've been, listening to stories ever since, humans existed. We listened to stories, to fairy tales, to mythology, and the structure of all of these stories is always the same. It doesn't matter how long we might stay in one area in one of those steps, or maybe we are stuck in one for a long time, or maybe the coloring of it is different, the story, the characters in it are different, but the steps are always the same. And what I find really interesting is that the first step in the hero's journey is the ordinary world. So that's your comfort zone, and that's just, who you are. And when you start out on that journey, everything that you bring with it, including all those unconscious beliefs and everything. And that's your ordinary world. And your journey is, stepping out of that comfort zone. But the second step on the hero's journey is the resistance. There's the call to adventure, something that calls us out of this comfort zone. But then one really important step is the resistance to it that we all have, because if there's no resistance whatsoever, it's not a hero's journey, because, stepping out of the comfort zone by definition is uncomfortable. And, we don't want to experience uncomfortable things, obviously. So it's a sure sign that when we really feel uncomfortable, when we feel scared, or, whatever, then that's a good sign that there's a big potential in there for transformation.
And ultimately, the 12th house is the resolution or the end of your journey, perhaps.
Yeah.
It's certainly the resolution of your journey. And that's very comforting to me, because that's the moksha, the ultimate moksha house of spiritual liberation, of letting everything go. It can be interpreted as actual isolation, hospitalization, or stepping away from the material world. And it's a shedding.
Yeah.
It's a shedding of, perhaps what you deemed important at some points in your life, whether they're materialistic, whether they're relationships that don't serve you any longer. So it's like ultimately you're being brought back to this place of surrender.
Yeah.
And then perhaps we start again. House number 1, new lifetime.
Starts again all over, yeah.
But it's all cycles. And we're, our theme today is about the moon. And of course, the moon is all about cycles. So it's, the lunar map it's a 30-day cycle. It's called the titis in Sanskrit, and each day is, has a particular archetype to it.
Yeah.
And, it sets our calendars. And as women, it's very much attuned to, represent our cycles. And
absolutely.
I don't know if you mind me disclosing this, but one of the things we were talking about before this is, coming to a point in your life as women where you're going through the menopause cycle. Yeah. Which I think is interesting. I don't know what it's like in the German language, but like in English, it's the change.
Yeah. In German as well, Wechseljahre, it means the years of change. Yeah.
The change. And it's
the changing
really,
years. Yeah.
Yeah. And then that's the ultimate transformation, right? And
absolutely.
we had discussed how, frightening, but how empowering it is,
Yeah.
because we have been flooded, as mothers especially, with these hormones to care for our children, to put other people first,
Yeah.
and to be
To
people
be
pleasers.
exactly, yeah, to be good moms, to be, mothering caretakers
Yeah,
to not only our children, but to the world. And, there's a good reason for that. And it's good
yeah,
and it has its place. Of course, that's really important because we are the mothers of the world. But there is a time where we can shed that role. And while that's really scary, maybe, it's everybody who has children knows it's a little bit of a scary time when the children move out and you're all of a sudden left by yourself. And, it's, you just don't have those roles. But how many women separate at that time at
yeah,
around the age of 49? And
yeah.
coincidentally, that's
And
also
leave their
the age.
jobs as well, leave their
Exactly.
careers. Yeah,
Yeah. Coincidentally or not, that's also the age where all the planets in the chart have matured, where even the last planet, Ketu, has matured in the chart. So we are actually fully matured, and then we shed our old roles, and we free ourselves. And I was thinking about, that feeling of in the hero's journey, that freeing moment, because in menopause, that's where I'm at really at the moment. It's not pleasant, but I have to say there's a real big sense of liberation in it. There's a real big sense of freedom.
maybe this is the archetype of the maiden, mother, and crone.
Yeah. Mm.
And there's such negative connotations, in terms of the crone.
Yeah.
Because I'm not saying this about either of us, but we don't have that juiciness. We talked about ojas, the juiciness of youth.
Yeah.
We're not fertile anymore. So this is an interesting time where perhaps we start to feel a little bit invisible in the world, but it's a time when ultimately we're stepping into this innate power.
Yeah.
And with Jyotish and with these studies, it's just become really clear to me that it's an absolute gift as you step into this wisdom to share this wisdom.
Yeah. Absolutely. And that's natural for that phase of life as well. We're stepping into the cycle of the crone, the elder. And in history, since the beginning of history, I think, this is what elders did. They would tell stories. They would teach their wisdom of whatever it is that they've learned. And in our society, yeah, it is the way that elders they usually are put away in a home, or they're not really useful for society. But at the same time, I really believe that it's important for us to claim that. Again, it's not up to society to give us that, but it's up to us to claim that again, and to just show that wisdom, because I do think there is a lot of wisdom that we have, that youth just doesn't have. I mean, when I look back, when I was younger, I thought I had it, but it's not the case, really.
Well, that's what they say. Wisdom is wasted on the young, isn't it? But I get that, because the key thing about having a Saturn Lord is that you're old when you're young.
Yeah.
And you're young when you're old. So I'm enjoying that now. But I was a very wizened old child.
You brought it back from your last life.
I must have. Yeah, I must have. But as I said, like, the moon is constantly moving through different constellations, through different nakshatras, which are the lunar mansions within the constellations. But the reason we wanted to talk about it today is because, well, there's a few key points about this upcoming moon.
Yeah.
On the 25th, there'll be a new moon.
Yeah.
In
Exactly.
Gemini.
Yeah.
And the new moon is joining Jupiter there. And we also, I think, are going to have a little chat about the nakshatra that this moon is in. It's quite a powerful lunar mansion. that this moon is in. But just to say that in terms of generally what a new moon is, it comes after the dark moon. These are the nights when the moon is not visible to us. And naturally enough, this is the time for absolute introspection. And so when the new moon starts to appear, you could say it's like hitting the refresh button, or it's the reset button, but it's, I suppose it's a time for beginnings.
Yeah, exactly. And also, I find that when you're looking at the new moon a little bit more closely in the chart, where is it at and what nakshatra is it in? It's kind of what colors the next cycle, the coming months. So, whatever new moon it's born in a certain nakshatra, and that will be the flavor of the whole moon cycle in some way. And this is why I find new moon particularly interesting in general, but this one in particular, because we've been talking about, all this hero's journey and the resistance and the difficulties. And this new moon is in a very interesting nakshatra. I find this nakshatra very interesting. It's called Ardra Nakshatra. And another, specific thing about this new moon is that the moon is not alone. It's surrounded by Jupiter. I'll have to look up now again.
Sun is there.
The sun and Jupiter, exactly. That's on.
Yeah,
and
sun has to be there, because when we look at a chart, if the sun and the moon are together in the same constellation, like, at close degrees, that's how we know there's a dark moon. And then as the moon continues, as they continue to move apart, this is the cycle of the new moon. Isn't that right?
Exactly. Yeah. And I'm looking at the chart right now, at the new moon chart, and it's I've done it for 12:31 on June 25, which is the exact time of the new moon from Germany, and I guess it's not much different probably in Ireland. And the interesting thing is that the moon and sun obviously are at the same degree at 9:54 degrees, but Jupiter is at 9:19 degrees. So it's in the same degree, really.
Mm-hmm.
So all three of them are in the same degree in Ardra Nakshatra, which is really quite significant.
Yeah, it is. And there's beautiful symbology in Jyotish and in the Vedas, and in the Rig Veda, which is one of the most ancient texts known to man. One of the gods is Rudra.
Yeah.
And Rudra rules Ardra. And I suppose it's a little bit like memorizing things when we're in school. The symbology really helps to build a picture of the energy of this particular nakshatra. And it's symbolized by the teardrop.
Mm-hmm.
Now, they're categorized into different, I suppose, what's the word? Senses. So it's a sharp, harsh nakshatra. Some of them are softer. Yeah. But this is really the conversation we've been having all along, because Rudra is the bringer of storms. Mm-hmm. And it's this dual energy of, benevolence and fierceness, but absolute purification and a washing away of everything. Exactly. How good is it to have a good bloody cry? Yeah. This is the teardrop.
That's the cleansing, isn't it?
It's the cleansing, yeah.
I mean, I read somewhere, I can't remember, but I read somewhere an article about just how many toxins we have in tears, how many toxins we really shed, even physically, in our tears. But, emotionally, of course, it's such a good, cleansing. And it's really an emotional storm that Rudra brings, or that Ardra brings, that can really clear the air. And after that, it's a real renewal. And I think also through the proximity of Jupiter, because Jupiter is such a spiritual, he is the guru, amplifies that spiritual aspect of, the moon in Ardra.
Yeah.
So it becomes really significant, whatever storm we're going through in this moment, but it's a really significant one. It's surrounded by the guru, the Jupiter, the spiritual aspect, the light of, our psyche, and the sun, the authenticity, the soul. So, this spiritual cleansing or emotional cleansing as well is something really important. So whether, people are going through different things right now, but whatever it is that people are going through, whether it's, emotional breakdowns from relationships or whatever circumstances, but it's comforting to know that this is necessary. It's an important cleansing, and that after that, we are freed. There's a freedom after that, a clearness, a clarity.
It's like after the rain, after the storm.
Exactly.
I know we were assigned a lot of books when we did our mentorship and our training, but I don't know about you, but the one that I use most is the Bepin Bahari book.
Yeah.
The symbology and the myths.
I know that one. Yeah, it's very nice.
It gets beneath the surface a little bit more. So I have a quote from this about the nakshatra of Ardra.
Yeah.
And it says that Ardra wreaks havoc in the life of ordinary people who seek fulfillment in the material world. Yeah. While higher on the evolutionary scale, it induces one to seek spiritual knowledge and live with the relationship of consciousness. And I think that's a really beautiful way of understanding it.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's really, really, it's such a powerful placement. Also, every nakshatra has a certain power, a certain shakti. And the shakti of this nakshatra is the power to make an effort, or the power to achieve something through struggle. So that means that this nakshatra actually really brings results through persistence and confronting whatever it is that we need to confront, also through hardship. And there's a lot of transformation possible through crisis, whatever crisis we're going through. But, there's transformation and liberation coming from that. And like you said, this is a beautiful quote, because it's really true that, whether it makes such a difference whether we're conscious of this or not. I think we've talked about this before in other podcasts, the difference between letting go of something purposely and being forced to let go of something. One of them feels really beautiful and freeing if I go and I clear out my wardrobe and I give away clothes that I don't need anymore. Well, this feels great, but if somebody comes and steals my clothes, it's not so great, But so the difference is just our attitude toward it. When we go straight away and say, okay, this is the time, this is the quality of time that we're in, so I'll go with that. And I confront things purposefully and embrace the transformation that comes after.
Yeah, acceptance as well. Acceptance, and it's a reframing. It's the beauty of us having this conversation is that we get to think deeply about this, so we can communicate this.
Yeah.
Whereas, it's not that we're exempt from these feelings, or that feelings are any easier if you have this information, but it does give you some autonomy of, and choice and agency and power in acceptance, and also, how you decide to frame every situation, how you decide to react, or act rather than react. And I always think, well, it's going to happen to me anyway. I can see it coming. I might as well use this as something very potent on my journey.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes it can come across as a little bit patronizing, when people will say, "Oh, yeah, you're going through something terrible," but you'll look back in 5 years and you'll see how
Yeah.
transformed you are. It'll only bring good. But when you're suffering in the moment, it's good to acknowledge the pain and allow that pain to move through you. And I think that's what Rudra is giving us.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's always easy to say that from the outside, but when you're in the middle of it, then it's hard to imagine. But that's as bad as that sounds, but it is also an important part of any transformation that we always have to be at some stage in the darkest cave. That's also a place on the hero's journey. We're really in the dark cave, and that means it's dark and we don't see the light. And if we see a lot of light and we think, oh yeah, sure, it will be fine, then it's not a real hero's journey. That's the beauty of it, that we have to experience those emotions, those really difficult and intense emotions as well, because we just have to.
Yeah, and also it's not that straightforward. We're just talking about one aspect, one constellation, well, 3 planets in this case. But we have to balance that. And of course, we have the beautiful fiery balance of Venus and Aries that we discussed in our last podcast. And, all of those flavors really make these complex situations so interesting. And if we can be curious about how we're reacting and our emotions that are coming up, we can really learn a lot about ourselves. I was telling you before we started that I've just begun some psychotherapy. I haven't done psychotherapy in 10 years. And I just thought, I'd love for someone to root around my mind.
That's a perfect thing to do when, the planets are like that, really, because it's a transformation. And when you're doing psychotherapy or anything like that, then that means you're going into your transformation consciously, and you're consciously also looking for help, because we need other people. We just need that, that's another point in the hero's journey, that we need a mentor on that journey. And, if we go ahead like you're doing and we're looking for that mentor and we're going on that journey consciously and with awareness, that's the best thing we could do in our lives.
Listen, exactly. You're just making me realize now that I started this journey around the time that Jupiter moved in to Gemini.
Yeah.
And of course, Jupiter is the guru, Jupiter is the teacher, this is the mentor. And another thing that we haven't discussed, which I think is very interesting, is the fact that Gemini is owned by Mercury. So there's Mercury energy here too.
Yeah.
And one of the things that was new to me when I did a deep dive into yoga years and years ago is like, we don't just talk about the brain and the mind as one collective thing. The moon represents manas, which is, the emotional mind, the sensory mind. And Mercury represents the intellectual mind, the buddhi, the discerning mind. Yeah. And what's happening now is that the emotional mind is sitting in this energy of Gemini, which is all about intellectualization and discerning, discriminating, and figuring things out. It's like the analytical part of the mind. Now, too much of one or the other is challenging, but when they come together in the dual nature of Gemini, that's an interesting coming together of our collective mind. There can be a lot of transformation there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's really interesting, the general play of the planets. I've actually looked a little bit at the Chandra Lagna of that moon constellation. So if you look at the moon and then the other planets in relation to that moon, that's quite interesting as well, because we have, for example, Mercury as the second from the moon, Mercury in Cancer, in Pushya Nakshatra, and that's kind of a real emotional intelligence and an intuitive communication that it brings, to that otherwise really sharp process that's going on in Ardra. And it's almost like a turning inward, and which softens it again a little bit and supports anyone, for example, who has, communication, or who has issues or has to make an effort to clear things with other people through communication, even if it's difficult. But that is something, for example, that supports it again.
Do you know what I always think of when I hear Pusha?
What?
It's favorable for everything except marriage.
Exactly. Yeah, I know that so well. Yeah, Mariam said that to me. And isn't it so true? I have ascendant and moon in Pushya, and
Okay.
it's really true. I have
Well,
to
yes,
say.
my moon is in Pusha as well, and I'm one marriage down so far at the age of 46.
Oh, that's so funny. Yeah. Yeah.
That's okay. That's okay. We've both got beautiful Venus energy.
Exactly.
Love is the key.
Yeah.
Marriage, maybe, in terms of freedom. What is the concept of marriage really?
Exactly. That's it. And I have had 2 beautiful marriages while they lasted.
Yes, me too. Well, one.
All right. I want to just have a little look at the other planets again, from the moon, because that can really be quite telling as well. So because there is that Mars Ketu conjunction in Leo, and that's third from the moon. So that is giving a little bit of a courageous push to express oneself, maybe, possibly, maybe even quite dramatically, but the emotional instability that Ardra can sometimes bring, that can cause conflicts. But
Because of course people around you who are used to you as you are very uncomfortable with change, and conflict can certainly arise.
Absolutely. And do you know what? Also, I think we talk a lot about, conflict and anger, and nobody likes to be angry, and nobody likes to be confronted with someone who's angry. But at the same time, anger is far too often suppressed as well. And anger can be really something very healthy and positive. From an Ayurvedic perspective, it's Agni, it's the fire, the digestive fire of the mind, because when we have toxins, in the body, then the body reacts, for example, with inflammation. When we have, bacteria or something, the body reacts by increasing the fire, the metabolism, or, we get maybe a little bit of inflammation when we, for example, when we have an infection, or we get a fever. But that's the process of the body to deal with that infection. And if it's let, then it can run its course, and we're fine again. But then we have kapha. We have all we have, the tissue that tries to cool. And if that is too much, if that is putting too much of a layer over the inflammation, then the inflammation is just suppressed. And that's how autoimmune disease occurs eventually, if that keeps going. And in the mind, it's the same. When we get angry at something, and especially as women, before menopause, we really have a tendency to suppress anything that comes up, any anger, any fire that comes up. And that gets layered into our unconscious mind, and it sits there. And eventually it will be, cause for disease, or cause for being unwell. And so I think sometimes really to look at that to look at our anger. What is it actually that I'm angry about? And finding a really good channel for it, a good expression for it, is really important. And that can be the clearing through the storm as well, you know, that that I'm not swallowing my anger, but I'm freeing myself through it.
That's fascinating. And I'm just thinking, really, the other element of this Mercury energy in with the planets in Gemini is that, yes, it's about the intellect, Budai, which we mentioned, but of course it's also about communication.
Yeah.
And with Jupiter there, it's calling for, certainly a depth of communication. It's almost like sacred communication, but it's about honesty and truth, isn't it?
Yeah.
Really. And as cliche as it sounds, it's like, speaking your own truth and perhaps not being afraid of how other people respond to this, because the fear of conflict, or, as women, not being a good girl or being seen, women were always derided for being angry, and it was never, it was always something, certainly, that I have suppressed personally, because there's not a huge amount of fire in my chart. There's a lot of earth, there's a lot of water, but really connecting to that power is kind of a bit of a revelation.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it really is a revelation for many of us. Eventually in our lives, we'll come to a place, and I feel like I'm there through menopause now, is that, it's this dragon energy is set free. And while that might be scary at first, but ultimately it really is freeing our power. It's freeing ourselves, it's giving us wings, and it's, and it's also what it is setting boundaries, is learning to set boundaries. Because when I get angry, this is a sign. This is a sign that my body and my psyche are giving me, here is my limit. Don't go any further. And that's really important as well, to acknowledge and to respect.
And it's not coming from a place of, I'm going to certainly say this about you, of unhealed trauma, resentment. It's coming from a place of, as you would say, radical compassion, self-love. And that's the difference when it's curated and conscious.
Yeah, exactly.
As opposed to an absolute explosion when you have been burying things down and extract, just not dealing with them. And I've been really deep in my TM practice recently.
Yeah,
and I just found it, as much as I love physical yoga, I've just found this TM practice very steadying.
That's great.
And we had a meeting recently. There's a lovely Sangha community around it as well. And we're really considering silence. And I think the reason I'm bringing this up is because you can have this flash of anger and not understand why you're angry, and perhaps regret how you express it.
Yeah.
But if you leave space for quiet through practice or sadhana in your life, then you're hyper aware of the root of this, and then our response can be a lot more curated. And I read this this quote about silence, because it's hard to find, Sandra, isn't it? I mean, I don't know where you're based. Like, you have a nice countryside around you, don't you?
No, it's not that. Yeah, I'm in a small town, but it's not that silent.
Yeah, there's no silence here. No, there's no silence in my house.
If the neighbors are fighting, you'd know about it.
Okay. Well, as soon as I step out of my door, the older I get, the more hyper aware I am of how unquiet things are.
Yeah.
But this quote really helped me. It's that silence hasn't gone away. It just has to be chosen. And I think a lot of the distraction techniques we do now, they're to avoid silence. We try to erase silence from our lives. And
that's very true.
At the heart of, like, one of the first things I say to my yoga students when they start their teacher training is, we're going to spend a lot of time learning asana because this is what people expect. Physical practice. They want to do movement. They want to come to you and learn postures. But let's look at the limbs of yoga here, meditation and connecting to quietude, the journey from the head down to the heart. This is where the real work starts. And we're conditioned to have to fling our bodies around the place first. But hopefully that will get us to the quietude.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you know, I was just leading a yoga teacher training for kids, a kids yoga teacher training. And I was really thinking, this is crazy, but the kids yoga teacher training involves, or when you do a yoga class for children, it usually, if it's done well, involves more yoga than any adult class that I've been to, because the adult classes tend to be asana classes, which is beautiful and it's great and I love it. But it's in the kids yoga that you really think about the yamas and niyamas and all the aspects of yoga. And this is just struck me recently, this is actually crazy, that we lose that as adults. And maybe we should bring that back. And also the emotional aspect of yoga, that's so important, because that's what makes yoga a healing practice and a therapeutic practice. And I practice a lot of Ashtanga yoga, and the first series, for example, that's yoga chikitsa, that's yoga therapy, but it goes far beyond the physical therapy. It's an emotional therapy as well, because you have so much coming up sometimes during the practice. When you're doing your practice, there's emotions and thoughts and feelings arising, and to sit with them, like you say, in whether it's in a seated meditation or during a moving meditation, but to really allow them and to sit with them, it's so important. And also so what you said earlier, that's really important too, I think, to distinguish this healthy anger with the anger that comes from trauma. I think Gabor Mate has a really good way to describe that. I love Gabor Mate and read his books, and I really recommend him to anyone who's interested in that. But he would say, you can recognize a healthy anger actually feels good. It feels like freeing, and it feels like exactly like Ardra Nakshatra. It feels like this is a storm, and then it clears and it feels free. But anger that comes from trauma doesn't stop. You can't stop it. You're angry and it comes over. It's like a loop in your mind, and it just doesn't stop. And that's one of the signs that maybe, look at that, then that might be triggered from something deeper.
This is the hurt people, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
And what you're bringing me back to think about as well is that if we look at the limbs of yoga and the roots of yoga, or the bottom two branches of the tree, are, my doorbell might ring in a moment, are the yamas and the niyamas. So traditionally, you did not start your asana practice until you were well grounded and established in the philosophy of yoga. And if you're unfamiliar with them, it starts with ahimsa, compassion, non-harming. And from there, we explore, all of the topics that make up modern psychology, or you can compare them to the 10 Commandments. There's nothing new here. But the way you're leading your children through it is the most natural way, isn't it? Starting with this underpinning philosophy. And then that's interwoven into how you treat your physical body as well when you start to physically practice, and how you treat everybody around you. And you're firmly grounded then in the beauty of the philosophy.
Yeah. And most of all, ahimsa, it's non-violence and not trying to force things. And you can only do that when you have a trust. And so that becomes the basis for everything, to build up the trust first. And on the basis of trust, we can do anything. We can go our path, and we can do our hero's journey, and we can be courageous and just face the storm.
Yeah. Trust ourselves and trust the tumultuous journey.
Exactly.
And then we get to decompress by chatting every now and again, which is lovely.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much, Aoife. I hope
It's been a pleasure, Sandra. Thank you so much.
Thank you too, and I'll talk to you soon again.
Love to.
Yeah. You were listening to a podcast by the Little School of Happiness. For more information, please go to sandrahayes.eu, or if you are in Germany, sandrahayes.de.